Topsy the elephant killed a man and was sentenced to death by electrocution. Topsy's execution and the film that records it were used to publicize both moving pictures and electricity, two of the discoveries exploited by America's most famous inventor, Thomas Alva Edison. Edison, the father of the motion picture industry, was known as the man of 1,000 patents. For him, art and science came second to profit. Anything that won't sell, he said, I don't want to invent. This statue illuminates his library, which is now a museum. A more public memorial is the New York skyline. When Edison died in 1931, for one dark, respectful minute, the lights went out all over America. And his name lives on. Edison was the all-American self-made Superman. He perfected everything from the telegraph to the phonograph. But in 1899, a critic wrote, his greatest art was that of coining money through the collective work of others. Today, Edison's laboratories at West Orange, New Jersey, are a national shrine. Generations of visitors have given a catalogue of Edison's achievements, and he was indisputably the first to market moving pictures. The emphasis here is very much on Edison himself. The vital contribution of his workforce is barely mentioned. In 1888, delighted with the success of his phonograph, Edison wrote,
I'm experimenting upon an instrument which does for the eye what the phonograph does for the ear. This apparatus I call a kinetoscope.
It took a year for Edison's company to develop this camera, which put pictures on a celluloid film. The man responsible was William Dixon. The star of his first film was another Edison employee, Fred Ott. The subject, Fred Ott sneezing. Running time, 2 seconds. Here's an action replay of that short but historic sneeze. Each frame of that 2-second film was reprinted on photographic paper and deposited in the Library of Congress to preserve copyright. This practice was uniquely American and designed to stop potential rivals copying the films or stealing the plots and techniques. It's thanks to this business stratagem that many early films survive. The old paper prints have been remade into rolls, whereas a lot of early film stock decomposed and vanished forever. To conduct his experiments in moving pictures, Edison built the first film studio in the world back in 1894. It cost $600 and was known as the Black Maria. The roof of the studio was cranked open to let in the sunlight. The Black Maria was on a turntable which allowed it to follow the sun round the sky. Inside was the camera designed by William Dixon, an unwieldy object weighing hundreds of pounds. It was easier for Edison to bring subjects into his studio, and he brought the most popular subjects he could find. The first boxing match was a great success. Within 2 months, the then world champion Gentleman Jim Corbett in the shorts was signed up to fight in the Black Maria. It was the first exclusive star contract. The boxers were reported to have got $5,000 the equivalent today of $250,000. Corbett told the sports press,
It's stipulated that I must put the guy out in 6 rounds. You can bet I'll do the trick. It's too much money to let slip out of one's grasp.
What Corbett didn't say was that the fight was fixed. He would win by a knockout in the final frames. The big money involved encouraged other film producers to turn boxing promoters. The public, whether ignorant or just insatiable, even watched bogus fights. The audience here is painted onto a backcloth and the fighters are local stand-ins. Nowadays, we think of film as being projected onto a screen. Edison, however, didn't do that. He reckoned to make more money if only one person at a time watched his film on a coin-operated peep show machine. He could have developed a projector, but he was afraid that public screenings might exhaust the potential market. "Let's not kill the goose that lays the golden egg," he said of his kinetoscope. The first 10 kinetoscopes were set up on Broadway in 1894. Within a year, there were 1,000 in operation in amusement arcades and picture parlors. A minute of moving pictures for a nickel. In 1896, the French brothers Lumiere were heading for America with a camera that could also project films. Edison made up for lost time by buying a projector from another American inventor. On April 23rd, he narrowly beat the French to the first public screening in America in what's now Macy's department store. The man behind the projector was its inventor, Thomas Armat.
I gave the first exhibition ever given in a theater at Costin Beale's Theater on 14th Street in the city of New York in the month of April 1896. Looking back to that date, it seems almost unbelievable that the palaces that are now devoted to moving picture exhibitions should have sprung up in the short period of 33 or 4 years.
The Vitascope pictures were an instant success. According to one report,
The house went wild. There were calls all over for Edison, Edison, speech, speech.
of course, those silent pictures were never really silent. In the early days, there was often an MC whipping up enthusiasm or pointing out details, and there was also the sound of music. The Americans by now also had lighter cameras. To match their European rivals, they had to escape from the studio and take to the streets. Edison didn't keep his American monopoly for long. His own man Dixon left and started the American Mutoscope and Biograph Company. Canned reality was not only a popular sensation, it was also a highly marketable commodity. The mass appeal of film in America was understandable. It was a nation of immigrants, many illiterate, millions of whom couldn't even understand English. For them, film was a universal language. Exhibitors demanded simple, lively films. They bought them outright from the new film producing companies for $10 or $20. Audiences could see them for a nickel or a dime. It was family fun, well within the pocket of the dollar-a-day working man or woman. Films also showed Americans their own vast country for the first time. Traveling showmen with projectors took the miracle of moving pictures to small towns across the continent. Farmers at country fairs could sit behind a camera mounted in a train, see sights 1,000 miles away, and share a ride to the edge of extinction. By 1897, Edison, the film producer, had three main rivals. Vitagraph, which started out on a rooftop before building a proper studio. Biograph worked out of this building in New York. And over in Philadelphia, there was the Lubin Company. Edison fought hard to control the new trade in moving pictures. His patents were tightly drafted to protect every technical detail, down to the width of the film stock, the size, and even the frequency of the perforations. In retaliation, Edison's competitors hid their equipment under coats and blankets to escape the attention of his spies. Some even put locks on their cameras to protect their secrets. Biograph fought and won a crucial court battle after they'd invented this mechanism which perforates film stock as it runs through the camera. And in that way, they outwitted Edison's patents. In 1898, America fought Spain over Cuba, goaded on by the press barns. Wars sold newspapers, and patriotism also became big box office. The film companies did their bit with fundraising films like this one. Politicians McKinley and Dewey are in the opening doors of a tableau showing Uncle Sam in Colombia wrapping poor little Cuba in the stars and stripes. Making films of the war itself wasn't easy with the cameras of the time. It was even harder to make films that lived up to the blood and thunder accounts in the newspapers. Pictures of soldiers washing or just horsing around was the best Edison's men could do. The solution? If you can't film it, fake it. In the hills around Edison's New Jersey studio, actors posing as Cuban peasants were routed by actors dressed as American soldiers. Edison's catalog description was a masterpiece of ambiguity.
Photographed from nature, so true to life as to force the observer to believe they're seeing reality. Wonderfully realistic, thrilling and appalling. Satisfaction guaranteed.
The filmmakers weren't over-concerned with convincing detail either. They didn't even bother to change the trenches from one war film to the next. That troublesome hybrid, the dramatized documentary, is in fact as old as film itself. Who's to say if the audience thought it was the real thing? But they certainly liked what they saw. Two Vitagraph cameramen, Smith and Blackton, were in Cuba for the war in 1898. Their footage was genuine, but rather boring. Smith, in the middle here, explained the dilemma over the sea battle in Santiago Bay.
We knew we were in trouble. Blackton said we could fake a sea battle. I said he was insane. But as the minutes passed, the idea got better and better. Why not? We bought a set of photographs of the Spanish and American fleets and cut out the ships.
Using a turned-up table filled with an inch of water, the battle commenced.
We needed someone to blow smoke into the scene. To keep the secret, Mrs. Blackton volunteered in this day of non-smoking womanhood to smoke a cigarette. Almost every newspaper praised Vitagraph's feat in obtaining on-the-spot pictures of the historic event.
A big national event was the Pan American Exposition of 1901. All the major film companies turned up to film and to experiment. An Edison cameraman, Edwin S. Porter, stole the show with this day-to-night film of the electric tower. To make this film, Porter devised a special gearing mechanism. He then panned across the scene, exposing each frame for 10 seconds. This one shot took him all night to make. Politicians quickly got in on the act. President McKinley's family had invested heavily in the Biograph Film Company, and Biograph's constant coverage of McKinley must have helped him get re-elected. At the 1901 exposition, the cameras filmed his last speech. The next day, he was assassinated. Edison's cameraman, Edwin S. Porter, then went one better. On the way back from the funeral, he filmed the outside of the prison where McKinley's assassin was held. Then, with a technique ahead of his time, he mixed through to an interior scene of the execution. This, of course, was a reenactment staged in the studio, but again, it drew the crowds. The next president, Theodore Roosevelt, thoroughly understood the power of the camera. During the Spanish-American War, he had seen its political potential. After that, he went out of his way to make sure his whistle-stop campaigns were covered and shown nationwide. A political art had also been established. The persuasive power of moving pictures was exploited right from the start. Edwin Porter filmed this Highland Fling in 1897. It's an ad showing the effects of Dewar's whiskey. And this silent snap, crackle and pop commercial dates from 1904. Private inventors discovered that the camera was, as it still is, a sucker for any kind of stunt. This man is putting himself in the line to publicize his new safety bumper for streetcars. camera was eager for anything new. Back in 1903, the Flatiron Building, with its dramatic shape, was the most exciting skyscraper in New York. Today, these old films are often fuzzy and rather jerky. That's largely the result of 3/4 of a century of use and abuse. The basic technology was sound even then. To prove the point, we got cameraman Carol Malkames to reshoot the Flatiron Building using a 1908 camera with modern film stock. The trickiest part for the operator was winding the film through while tilting the camera. If the stock was good and the cameraman competent, there's no reason why an audience back in 1903 shouldn't have got quality like this, though not in color, of course, unless it was tinted by hand. From the start, filmmakers reveled in the discovery that moving picture time didn't have to equal real time. When the Star Theatre in New York passed away, a cameraman gave it a unique epitaph. 3 minutes of celluloid commemorated 3 weeks of demolition. Every 4 minutes, a single frame was exposed. The building slowly vanished as shadows danced and life buzzed on around it. Like so many old music halls, the Star had been seen off by the camera, which celebrated its end with such virtuosity. The beginning of the end for the music hall really came when the first theatres to show films only opened in 1902. Within 10 years, there were to be 10,000 picture houses across America. And some of the people running those early picture houses went on to become the movie moguls of Hollywood, men like the Warner Brothers, Adolf Zukor, and William Fox. But the foundations of the image industry were laid at the beginning of the century by the pioneer companies like Edison and Biograph. Within a few years of the turn of the century, they made the experience of going to the pictures familiar enough to be recreated as comedy. Back in 1903, Edison's men were already sufficiently confident to send up the innocence of the first public reaction to film just 7 years before. Uncle Josh, a stock idiot character, is so terrified by the train that he scurries back to his seat. In the next film, a kiss isn't just a kiss for Uncle Josh. If audiences were confused by the form, they were sure enough about what they enjoyed. In 1903, for the first time in America, the young industry made more fiction than non-fiction films. The factual film, with its simple view of everyday life, had lost its first battle against the power of the filmmaker's imagination.